bad cold email can hurt brand authenticity. But my personal opinion is that cold email is just a way of life. Posting on LinkedIn, it's creating this enormous awareness and kind of community engagement for the perfect audience of people for our product. I'm just trying to figure out like what is the opposite of the response rate problem and how we're going to market with our B2B. I think that you can still do the outbound game so long as it works, right? But like, I just think that my name's Adam Robinson. I am the founder and CEO of retention.com and RB2B, as many of you probably are aware. This is the first ever community event that we're doing. Santosh and I have had grand plans of doing something like this for a very long time. And I have to thank Chris Walker for, I was gloating last week about how I was like so amazed. Basically, we launched this RB2B thing and got the whole pricing thing completely wrong. I've had grand plans of doing something like this for a very long time. Whoa. I'm getting feedback. Okay. Yeah. If y'all can mute yourself, I know I didn't do this thing right. So that would be great. So I was posting this work in public content and I was just so amazed that of the level of insights that I was getting back from the LinkedIn community. I was gloating about it in this chat room that I have with Chris Walker and Andy Muborn. He's like, man, if you think that LinkedIn is good, you're missing out on the best part of it. It's this weekly community event. And we asked him what his format was. And he's like, I just do a, 10 to 20 minute sort of like monologue, open up the floor to questions. And he's like, the overall sort of intelligence that comes out of the group and the event, he's like, you just got to start doing it. So Andy did his last week. I actually was on it with him. And then this is ours. So without further ado, I'm going to just jump in. I basically made a short presentation about kind of what brought me to right here and some of, I think, the novel things that we're doing and why they're working so well. And I wanted to just go through this brief presentation. Inbound led outbound. I talk about this a lot. I'm going to go through my journey in 2023, what got me to sort of radically change my viewpoint about kind of the efficient way to go to market and, what we're doing and how it's working. I'm sure you know who I am because I post all of this on LinkedIn nonstop. I'm Adam Robinson. I'm a 3-time startup founder, bootstrapped 22 million ARR in 4 years. Retention.com, we sell the e-commerce. It does person level website identity that fuels a lot of different kind of workflows, mainly for the top of the Shopify ecosystem and lower mid-market. That company has 60 employees. RB2B is 2 months old. We have 6,500 users, 78% activation rate, and 350,000 ARR, and we don't even have the feature set that we plan to sell yet. I'm really into this LinkedIn game right now. It's kind of the most fun thing I'm doing. I have around 80,000 followers as we speak. I live in Austin, Texas, which I mentioned, with my wife, Helen, daughter, Emma, and I have a 6-pound Chiweenie named Bonnie that I should really put a picture instead of myself. I mean, everybody prefers to look at Bonnie. So this is the chart of quarterly ARR for retention.com. There's a few very interesting things about it. While at first glance, it goes up and to the right. If you can imagine what it felt like to basically from quarter 3 of 20 to the end of quarter 1 of 21, we barely grew at all. I literally thought this business was broken. I was looking to move on. I was very bored of it, but we just kept like, the fundamental problem was like the churn of this business has always been an issue. And we've kind of just done stuff over time to get ahead of churn, reduce it, whatever else. We're currently experiencing, as you see from this dip right here, a similar issue. It's like Santosh calls these S curves. We've had like these waves of innovation that have sort of like kind of catapulted us up and then flattened us out. And then we've had to like do it again. In 2023, that wave of innovation was focusing on e-commerce and building more features for them and changing our pricing and growing the team and all that stuff. In the beginning, we basically got to 12 million ARR with 1 salesperson, 6 people total, and a group of people in the Philippines that were doing outbound prospecting. The reason I mention that is because I'm not sure people appreciate that you can get a really, really long way with a very small team if the product and the go-to-market are right. So what was the massive mistake that was made in 2023, and why did I even go down that route? So everybody's heard of this team, I'm sure, Jasper AI. So hold on. So somebody's can not mute. I'm sorry. Okay, I think that did it. So I actually shared an office with Jasper in, for 2 years before they started this company. The 2 years before they were Jasper AI, they were not Jasper. They were called Proof. They were a bunch of schmucks from Maryland that were stuck at 2 million ARR. I was also a schmuck that had two startups that were completely stuck at 3 million ARR. It was in this sort of the Q4 20, Q1 21 timeline. And at the time, and I tell this story because I think it's like so amazingly insightful. At the time, I had my first company called Robly, which was stuck at 3 million. And I had this company called Get Emails, which was like a little ahead. It's callretention.com now, a little over 3 million, but it was kind of stuck to. And Dave, the CEO of Jasper, and I thought that the move was to just accumulate a portfolio of small startups that were all kind of at 3 million and they all created cash. And if we had 5 of them, it would be awesome. And at the time, Get Emails, which is now retention.com, was in the lead at 268,000 monthly recurring revenue. If you look at the date of this, it's December 29th, 2020. He sent me the first paying customer for $100. He says, first paying customer, had the idea 7 days ago. Hopefully this is my Get Emails. So that's what he was shooting for when these guys started Jasper. They were like, the goal was to get 268,000 MRR with this company, right? That was in December 9th, 2020. We all know what happened a year later. They went 0 to 50 million faster than any other company ever has. And the reason I bring that up is because my experience as an entrepreneur has been being stuck and then figuring out ways to get unstuck, throwing spaghetti against the wall, just figuring out new stuff. And watching these guys do that was so incredible because even if I heard that story on a podcast, I wouldn't have thought it applied to me. But I sat there for that year across this office with them, and I watched some guys from Maryland create a unicorn. And all of a sudden I was like, I can do that. Like, they're not any better than me. Like, it was almost like in my mind, it was reserved for people that went to Stanford and that, had a bunch of venture capital and like all this stuff. And like, I don't know, like the same exact struggle for 2 years. Like, if you see somebody break out of that, you kind of are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, and your ambition will follow that too. So like, I just love telling that story for 2 reasons. One, because I find it so deeply inspirational. And number 2, it's the reason why I tried to, my whole theory originally was like, I'm going to like keep this company super lean and bootstrap it and just, it's high churn, but if it stalls out at 20 or 30 million and I only have like, 15 people, that's a great cash business. But I was like, you know what? These guys went for a unicorn. I should try to do that too. So what happened, the kind of predicament we were in at the time, we had thought we identified this perfect ideal customer profile as big Shopify stores. We weren't going to give demos to anybody else. Like, before, it was like a self-serve product. And we were like, we have very low penetration and virtually no competitors. So what do? I read Dave Gerhardt's book, Founder Brand. I had become convinced with very little actual experience that building my personal social profile was the fastest way to generate awareness. And then it's like, well, where should you do it? And the Shopify guys were on Twitter, but LinkedIn had a much more favorable content creator to active user dynamic. So the idea was create the initial audience on LinkedIn, get good at creating content, and then go figure Twitter out, when the time came. And in addition to that, we thought it was just like a, brute force operation of, just pounding sales outbound. And then there was like, CS and support operations that needed to happen as well. So in the course of, we did most of it. Santos showed up. I tracked him down and basically begged him to join us because he has a lot of company building experience and I did not. He joined us when we were 6. And I think by, basically like January, we had most of these people, but February 1st was like a big day. We had a total transformation in the type of company that we were. I had the good fortune of, we already had, 12 or 13 million ARR, so we didn't need to go raise money to do this, which was like incredibly fortunate. I would not recommend having done this, doing it at this velocity. There's several problems which I didn't even fully appreciate until basically now. Sorry, where you just can't move that fast and go from a company of 6 people to 50 people. There's, to sum it up, the problem with moving that fast is when you're 6 people, you don't have your way of doing things yet. You don't have actual processes. So you go hire a bunch of people that are at organizations that have their way of doing things, and they show up and descend in your organization and nothing works. So right now, and I've been writing on LinkedIn about this, like we're going through the process of actually implementing the entrepreneur operating system in our company. We have an executive coach working with 8 people. We're doing all this like rocks and accountability, and like we run our meetings as L10s. And now I actually even understand what that means. Like before now, I did not. So what happened when we did all that? We had this Philippines team doing some outbound, and then we hired a small team of BDRs first. It looked as though it was working. We grew the BDR team much bigger. What happened when we grew the BDR team bigger is it was the same amount of demos being booked as when we had a small BDR team. I think that happened to a lot of people in 2023. But the realization that I had was these days, BDRs were not actually creating demand. They were just capturing the demand that was getting created from their activities elsewhere. And what also happened in 2023, we all know, SaaS took a hit. And at the end of the day, 8 North American BDRs were doing less than the PHI when the Philippines spray and pray. This chart is the number of salespeople employed versus the pipeline generated. Obviously, as all of this was going wrong, the VP sales is like, I'm out of here. This isn't working. So we were faced with the choice of either trying to get a new VP sales and keep this organization, or I wanted an inbound machine. I argued for, let's not replace the VP sales. Diana can do it. Let's take the team down to basically the smallest possible state that it could be in and still function. And lo and behold, what happened when we did that? Our pipeline generation went up, which was wild. So the fundamental problem with outbound that I believe is not only a problem that we are going to feel today, I just think it's irreversible trends. Its response rates are plummeting, right? And we kind of all know why. Once everybody is using automation tools and so much crap is being sent, it just becomes harder, even if you're the best outbounder in the entire world, it doesn't matter if you create the perfect personalized message if the channel is so clogged with other crap that message cannot possibly be read, right? So if you asked me if more emails were going to get sent, and if you asked me last year if more emails were going to get sent in 2024 than 2023, I would say with 100% certainty, yes. If you ask me if more email will be sent in 2025 than 2024, I would say 100% yes. That goes for every channel across the board. And automation's making it easier, Clay's making it easier, AI's making it easier. It's just a trend that is not going to reverse itself. So I write about this a lot. People who run outbound agencies and sell $1 million deals come back at me and they're like, what was your ACV? I'm like, it's 20 grand. They're like, well, you're an idiot. That should have never worked in the US anyway. So HubSpot made you think it was possible, basically. To which my response is, okay, that's fine. Response rates are down, 50% in the last 18 months. What do you think response rates are going to do over the next 18 months? My guess is they're going to go down another 50%. Now your floor is 40 or 50K. What about 2 more jumps of 18 months when it gets cut another 50% and another 50%? Now we're up to like a 200K deal. And if you ask me how many people are selling below 200K deals, I would say that's almost everybody. And, so it's like, it's a problem kind of like I had this really my smartest friend. I was a Wall Street guy for 10 years. I have a buddy who worked at Goldman Sachs. And in 2017 and 18, he became obsessed with shopping malls. He actually bought a shopping mall and he invested in a lot of shopping mall public equities. And the argument was like, this is overdone. Like the stores still create, rents or whatever. Jeff Bezos is not going to just destroy all of the Class B and C shopping malls that exist in the world today. If you fast forward to 2024, every single thing that guy owns literally went to zero because it was a mega trend. Jeff Bezos was going to destroy all of the B and C class shopping malls that exist in the world today, because that's just so much of a better shopping experience. Like sitting at home on the couch and consuming things through Amazon is much better than going to a Class B or C shopping mall. I view the mega trend in response rates as something similar. So while I've probably gone a little bit too far in, going crazy on the other way and just trying to figure out like what is the opposite of the response rate problem and how we're going to market with our B2B, I think that, you can still do the outbound game so long as it works, right? But like, I just think that doing something like we're doing is the future of all of this stuff. So it brings us to, what is this idea of outbound? It's a really simple sort of like three things. You need to get out in the world or in the digital world or whatever else and do things that drive traffic back to your site, right? And then once people hit your site, you do personalize one-to-one. This stuff can be automated. It may not be automated. You may want to automate some of it and like, go one-to-one, not automated on super high intent people, but do personalized one-to-one outreach of super high intent visitors. And the best signal of intent is somebody hitting your site, right? So, and then have a sales force that deals with basically declared intent. I'm ready for a demo. Like they're hitting people super low in the funnel who are basically ready to buy. And I just believe in that model because it makes salespeople happier. It's a smaller squad. They're only talking to people who want to buy. It gives them a lot of confidence. They're getting paid more, like whatever else. So it's, it's basically creating an inbound machine. But there's this middle part, which is an outbound layer that comes when people do hit your site, but they are not quite ready to buy yet. So what's that look like for our B2B? So our B2B, it's the B2B side. We're selling SaaS right now. It's mainly people with marketing titles or founders of smaller companies. For me, and there's this perfect alignment between, who I am as a SaaS founder and the audience on LinkedIn. And it's just working really well. It's primarily Santosh and I. Pete started posting too, but primarily Santosh and I posting on LinkedIn. It's creating this enormous awareness and kind of community engagement for the perfect audience of people for our product. So that's motion number one. It takes a ton of effort. I can talk about that next week. Chris Walker does it a lot more efficiently than I do. He spends a lot less money on it. He's been doing it a lot longer, but like I'm spending a ton of time and energy on that part of it. The second part of my motion, which I think before I got really good at the first and built a massive audience, it would be harder. I'm trying to get on other people's podcasts and guest slots because, and I don't even care what size they are. I don't screen people out. Everybody has some super fans for the most part. And, I was just on Gerhardt's. I don't know how many people regularly listen to his podcast, even if it's 100. And I spent an hour, A, I'm building a relationship with Dave Gerhardt, and B, the 100 people that listen to every single episode of his podcast are absolutely super fans. And if they can hear me speak for an hour, I think that the odds that they're going to go back and hit my site is pretty high. At least check out the LinkedIn, start following me there or whatever. So those are, I would say, like the two things that I am doing that I'm going to keep focusing on to just get people to come back and hit the site. And then for this motion in particular, we think we have a very good PLG agency motion that's like a win-win for the agency, where for lead gen agencies, they can basically, offer this for free to their customer for a month. And then if it ends up being something that they can also make enough money to layer on an agency service on top of, they do it. If not, or if it's like a smaller company, then it can just be free forever and they never pay us. We think that that's going to be a great source of also just, demand kind of inbound. I see SYC style cold email. We're doing some of this. Taylor is our email guy. And, this is like the whole sort of like, multi-domain strategy, hitting a bunch of lists from Apollo. We have such a compelling offer that it's just really effective for us. And then the last part is something that I've never really heard anyone else talk about. I thought, so the original intention with our B2B was to focus on like a mid-market audience and try to sell 30 to 50K ACV deals. The reason is because our last business, we struggle with a churn problem. And over the last 18 months, I've learned that there are inherently high churn product categories, meaning a CRM is going to be the lowest, a system of record, right? If you're using a CRM and you stop using it, you either went out of business or you switch to another CRM. Like you just have to have a CRM and it's storing all your data. On the e-commerce side, that's email, that's Klaviyo. It's email marketing apps. It is the CRM for the e-commerce company. At the total other extreme is when you're basically selling leads to people and trying to make that a software as a service company, which is what we're doing now. And the reason that's so high churn is because there's just a lot of reasons why people would turn it off. And if they turn it off, the only thing that changed about their business is they no longer have your leads. So in an effort to try to make it a lower churn buyer persona, I wanted to start with mid-market. And I thought it was possible, most of the time it's people start SaaS and they're kind of at the bottom and they have to start with SMB because usually you don't have a brand and that's necessary to sell to mid-market. And the idea was, well, we have this brand from LinkedIn, so let's start there. But the content was working so well that I thought if we had a free offer, this would benefit me with this megaphone way more than someone who did not have this megaphone. So there's this really interesting part of crafting an offer that has embedded virality that I don't hear many people talking about in software. Like just saying what we do, we will have people tell, if you use it once and you see the leads in Slack, like it's like this wow moment. And it's like, it's enough for someone to just go tell somebody else about it. And it's a really interesting thing that sort of works along with the content. It's like a viral content strategy and a viral core offer. And that's all driving people back to the site. So anyway, moving right along down to this middle part, we then do personalized one-to-one, and this can be automated. It is for our B2B outreach to high intent website visitors. So we go from our B2B to a clay table that filters by ICP and then sends AI generated emails based upon what the company of the visitor does, right? And that goes through Smart Lead. I'll do a whole thing about this in the future also, but that's what we do on our B2B. It's fully automated because it's a PLG free motion. There's a PLG free, and sort of will be an upsell at some point product. And then we will eventually ask. So what we have learned about our B2B is basically like, if you already know how to book outbound demos, then adding this into your machine will help you book more demos because all these people are like very high intent leads. If you do not yet know how to book outbound demos, then our B2B is kind of, it can be amazing, but it's more like just interesting. Like it can't teach you how to sell. So we're basically going to implement this very high velocity two-touch sales motion where we kind of ask questions that would lead us to know if people know how to book demos or not on the way in, and then make sure they're doing the right stuff. And then when they book a demo, ask them if they want to pay. And that's going to be the motion. So now retention.com, this is the 22 million ARR business that sells to very large small business and mid-market e-commerce companies. This motion, I still view it as similar. Like we're doing activity in the world that leads to a 70% of demos booked inbound motion to a very specific group of people. And the whole motion here is it's kind of like an ABM that gets prospects to physical events. So we're doing, having people do a Knicks game, or like we're doing, this, kind of medium-sized retreat in LA or whatever. I mean, people are asking tons of questions. I need to like get to these somehow, but I just, maybe I should have had, I don't know. So mega influencer motion, helping us get people to these events. We're executing our own events. We have tons of, we'll get like booths at trade shows and do activations around them. And then, there's just word of mouth and brand heat related to some of the stuff we're doing. And all of that is a 70% of demos booked is literally people hitting the site and booking a demo. And we don't really know where they came from because our attribution is not great, but it's from the sum of all of that stuff. And then how does it look on this side? Well, we're doing some cold email over there, but it's not largely responsible for most of the demos, but they love our B2B. They use it totally differently. They basically filter down to the ICP, and then the rep does manual outreach because these are larger deals. And it's manual through LinkedIn, and it's manual, they use SalesLoft, and yeah, they either get a demo booked on the email or they'll drive people back and get a form filled. And that's a full sales process, 20K ACV deal. There's like a 30-day onboarding. It's like a heavy process compared to the other one. So I view the advantages of this as your salespeople will be happier, I think, just doing more deals and only talking to low funnel prospects. Smaller teams, capital efficient. I think it's like a great way to bootstrap a model like this. It just requires way less bodies and, less people, less problems. I think smaller teams tend to have better cultures. And all of this will still work if response rates keep going down, which is my assumption of the future. And it's relatively easy to start doing this stuff. I don't expect it to go like it has gone for me, for everybody, but this general idea can certainly be implemented in any organization, right? Or you can shift towards it. And as far as I can tell, the major disadvantage is it's just less targeted than outbound. Like you're gonna get people asking for demos that you don't want to give demos to, but that's just emotion. You only accept people, you have an SDR dealing with it or do it automatically or whatever. So that is all I have for today for my Chris Walker style 30-minute monologue. I don't even know how to even start asking for questions here. Or maybe I should just read through some. Is everybody okay with me just like starting? I know there's a ton over here on the LinkedIn Live. I have 2 questions right now in the Zoom chat. So how about this? If you have any questions, just write them in the chat and I'll just start working through them. So Leonard or Leonard, I got a question from when you get it. Santos, can you provide an answer as he knows Apollo well? Apollo just launched a website visitors feature that seems similar to RB2B. Any comments on that? So it's just company level ID. They're doing a reverse IP lookup and we go down to the person, if that makes sense. And they'll probably get the company and then show you contacts at the company that could be in your ICP. Oh yeah, somebody answered that. Do you think cold email hurts brand authenticity that you build up on LinkedIn? So I think bad cold email can hurt brand authenticity, but my personal opinion is that cold email is just a way of life. And the people that you are cold emailing are so used to getting cold email that if you send decent email, it's not going to be so offensive or like whatever you're worried about. Personal opinion. So I will switch over to LinkedIn Live where there are now 784 participants. Geez, I don't even know how to see how many. You guys, can you tell that this is my first event? I don't even know how to see how many people are in here. Okay, so is there a way that you could further validate the people who visited automatically and not manually? Erska, you asked that. So we're using Clay to take the whole audience, which, by the way, as I have observed that the larger your traffic is, the more junk traffic that's in it. We're using Clay to basically look at the visitors, take them down to the ICP, and only email the people who are in ICP. So that's the tool that we use. We're about to build in ICP filters into our B2B. And yeah, that's the answer there. Max, thanks. You're doing great, Adam. I appreciate it. So I think I've heard other people like in Chris's event, he's got someone helping him and people maybe raise their hand and ask the question over audio, which is probably better engagement. Everybody wants to know, what about GDPR? Just knock that one out right now. So this is US only. The IPs, we ring fence them, meaning the script will not fire if the IP is a European IP address. And we only have US LinkedIn profiles in the database. So GDPR is, Europe is not looking to regulate a US technology done by a US company on US data subjects. That is not what the GDPR does. It regulates European data subjects in Europe. So whenever I say GDPR doesn't apply, I get somebody in Europe being like, well, for me, it would because there's this really weird situation. It's like, no, this is not about GDPR. There's zero GDPR risk to using it. Even if there is this weird tail situation because you're in Europe and you have whatever, Europe is not coming after you for doing this. So you should create some content. What's up? Somebody want to ask a question? I'm very open to this. Or was that a mistake? Okay. I'm looking for more questions. Does anybody else, have you thought about putting out content that educates the market on how to better integrate our B2B into their current efforts? Oh man, Max, this is like all I want to do. We have a really, really bad version of it right now. It's just not. So we're buying Audience Plus from Anthony Kanata, and we're going to basically make a lot of beautiful educational content that's very well framed and situated that people can walk themselves through depending on who they are to sort of learn how to do this better. What about Canada? No Canada also. Only US. 826 in the LinkedIn Live. 6 cents. How's the heat? Oh man, that is awesome. Some people really didn't like that last post that I put out. They said it felt thirsty, but like it's hard for me to like evaluate what sounds thirsty and what's not, because I get sent stuff like this every day. I get sent stuff like this. My company bought 6 cents thinking it was the greatest thing since sliced bread. We're getting less than 10% of the numbers being correct, and my entire leadership has been sacked. I only wish they'd been able to see the situation in the tool for what it was, snake oil. Thanks for calling out these rats. It's like, I mean, of course it's adverse selection and people are like coming into me and, giving me the negative stuff, but man, it's hard to know what to say and what not to say when I just get constantly hit with messages like that. So anyway, the 6 cents heat, I don't believe that they will make another move because it just gives me such great content, but man, I hope they do. So how are you figuring out which contacts are lower in the funnel? So we are not quite set up this advanced yet, but we will very soon be able to enable a combination of like repeat visitors and page views to where you can basically by behaviors figure out who's ICP and doing the stuff that indicates that they're going to keep progressing in the funnel. And like my idea is someday like we'll have all this automated stuff going on, but like the perfect people will actually have a rep even for our B2B, like reaching out to and trying to get in front of. So I think somebody raised their hand. I don't know. Man, I just don't know how to. Guys, one thing I promise everybody is by next week, I will know how to navigate this whole system better. And I will make this more engaging by inviting other people to ask questions rather than me just reading them off, because this is not the jam. I realize that.
Hey, Adam.
Yes.
All right. So you identify someone comes to your site, you give us the ping on Slack, right? Realize that they're kind of perfect ICP. Is it juice worth the squeeze to just start calling them, or should we put them into more of a flow?
So I think it depends on if phones work for your sales motion. 1000% call them. The people who book demos the quickest that I have seen use the phones. With retention.com, if you call these Shopify guides, they'll kill you. They'll literally like send someone to your house and they'll put you in the ground. They think it's like some kind of infringement on, their personal space or something. So phones are not an option, but if phones are an option, absolutely call them. And like one thing so we've been selling this type of tech, right? Like you identify someone on the site and then you contact them somehow for 5 years. The thing that I have learned, which is not immediately intuitive to a lot of people, is that the sooner you respond, it's generally better. Your instinct suggests maybe I shouldn't because there's something creepy about it, but like it's just sales. Most of the time, almost always, they will not associate you contacting them with their website visit. Like the internet's a very weird thing with respect to time and space. If you were to wait 1 week, I guarantee you none of these people would even remember that they visited your site at all. So they are showing the best intent signal, kind of like the harder you can go. Look, I wouldn't email people and say they were on the site. I would just give them a LinkedIn Connect, which is a brand impression. Those are like almost 100% accept rate as far as what I can tell for website visitors. And then I'd put them in an email sequence and I'd send them a LinkedIn message the next day and just see what happens.
Hey, yeah, okay. Can I follow up on that?
Santosh, please.
Excellent.
Please.
So if you do engage with people that are visiting your website, either through phone or email, just keep in mind that they may not be ready to buy from you yet because they didn't raise their hand, right? So what that means is they are in their buying process. And when they came to your website, very likely they went to a lot of your competitors' website as well. So help them through the buying process, hold their hand, offer to help with their buying research. And you'd be surprised. None of your competitors are doing this. So you get the first tap to your revenue.
Does anybody else have any questions? Does anybody else have anything to ask Santosh? I feel like
yes, I have a
go
question.
ahead, Alejo.
And it's more personal, more like entrepreneur, but I have hearing some of your talks about how do you believe I can do it when you talk about Jasper. And also you say that, okay, our platform is still lack of X or G or Y, X or things. Then how do you address those personal challenges, those imposter syndrome? Because you say, okay, I'm having this challenge. And what do you think about that?
That's a really good question. This may sound like a strange answer, but like before that Jasper thing happened, like Robley, my company prior to retention.com, which was called Get Emails in the Jasper days, it was stuck at 3 million for 4 years. And that's a really long time. And in order to just deal with my own, I don't know what you would call it, like feelings of inadequacy as an entrepreneur, because I had never been past that point, right? Like it's almost like I lowered my own ambition for myself. I was like, yeah, whatever, it's cash flow positive. It's a good business. I know I need to do something else, but like, I'm just a 3 million ARR guy and I'm going to see if I can start a few more companies that size. So that was the point of that story, right? I was like, and I had Dave brainwashed on that idea too. We both thought that we were just going to create this portfolio of very small SaaS companies, which by the way, like may not be a bad idea. They're much easier to create than, anything farther along because it's just so easy to start companies these days. And
Santosh post about that like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. So it was literally just sitting there living it with those guys that made it real for me that like I should be shooting, aiming higher, right? And it wasn't even any individual moment. It was just watching these guys have a type of success that we had both only read about on like the Y Combinator blog and on like the SaaStr blog, and it's like you read about it on these, this is kind of the point I was trying to make also. It's like you read about it on those blogs and you almost don't think it applies to you for some reason. At least I didn't. It's like, well, I got a $60 a month SaaS. I sell the really small business and like nothing that I do will make it grow. Like maybe that's just who I am. And then I had the good fortune of spending a year in the room with these guys who were really going through this transformational experience. And in a weird way, it led me to Santosh, who deeply believes in this idea that it's kind of all comes from within, and like you are your own ceiling. I don't know if you want to comment on that, Santosh, or not.
Yeah, it's never been easier to build a large size company than now, right? You could scale businesses, you have go-to-market tools, you have automation. It's much easier to build technology. You don't have to depend on capital. It's ultimately, we set, like Adam said, ceiling for ourselves. We don't want to believe in what we haven't seen elsewhere, right? But people who are doing it are no different than any of us here.
I mean, Santosh has been a part of a lot of them, which is why I wanted him to be the CEO of my company very clearly. What does this guy know that I don't know? And then, I think a year and a half into working together, we both really appreciate and respect our differences and,
Yeah, it's surprising, how much of the organizational inefficiency is because very well-intentioned folks, they just go in different directions, right? It's really important to align everybody to work on a shared vision. And this is very common with every team. I bet all of your teams have, some inefficiency baked in. We just picked one framework. You can use any other framework, but it's really, really important to kind of align and use your resources carefully.
So that's that. I have Hike asking, what's your formula for sharing on LinkedIn? Start beef with all competitors. So first of all, so Dave Gerhardt said when I was just on his podcast, he's like, anytime you get the opportunity to punch up, you should always punch up, because it just provides this incredible validation for what you were doing and visibility within their audience. And it just legitimizes you as a customer, as a competitor. I think anybody who's really gotten something going from scratch, the David and Goliath story is just so powerful. That is not, if you go back and look at my posts since, let's say, September, when I've been writing to B2B, that is not what they have been about. That's probably the most, in this audience, popular post that I've made, but it is not the substance of what I've been doing. Really, it's been, my strategy has been, and my philosophy has been, and this, I think this goes for any marketing. It's not just LinkedIn. It's like, how am I going to be different, right? And then it's like, I think the most important thing that allows you to be different is your perspective. So it's like, what does my perspective allow me to create from a content perspective? And, for me, it was like, all right, what am I willing to say or do that no one else is willing to say or do? So like, that's basically where the work in public stuff comes from. And in particular, being very honest about when the journey is not in the easy, phase, right? Like 2023 was hard for a lot of people in software. I believe that a lot of the reason why my following grew so much at the end of last year was I was willing to actually speak about, the fact that we're getting our teeth kicked in a lot of different ways. So some other guiding lights that I always have is like, I try to maximize authenticity. I use video in order to just make it feel like it's more of a person, because like, another thing is like, well, I watched Jasper take off. It's like, I know why that took off. It's like, well, what can Jasper not do? What can ChatGPT not do? Right? Can't talk about how my business did last month. It cannot quite yet get in front of a camera and like, provide an additional riff on like the posts I just made. It can't get on Dave Gerhardt's podcast, right? Like, so yeah, I mean, those are the underlying LinkedIn fundamentals that I tend to go by. Santosh's are a little different than mine, but he still does really well. What do you think? How would you answer that question?
Well, I think, in the end, when you're trying to cut through the noise, right, there's a ton of content coming by, right? You have to play by your strength. And Adam, you do really well telling stories. And it's kind of difficult to kind of replicate, right, some of this strategy unless you're good at it. So certainly I have a very different approach. But in the end, everybody needs to pick, how they can differentiate and what nonlinear methods they can follow to cut through the noise.
And I truly believe this, like Devin Reed uses this term content market fit. It took me 12 months to achieve it. Santosh kind of got to watch what I did from literally post number one. So I think he was able to get to just cover a lot more ground than I did in my journey a lot quicker, because I think I could like kind of explain why I thought what I was doing was working to him a little bit. But yeah, I mean, it's just a hard thing to do the best. Unsurprisingly, that's life, right? Like it's the reason I care so much is because it's basically our only marketing channel right now for this business. And yeah, that's it. I don't know. What else we got here? How's everybody doing? We now have 1,026 people on the LinkedIn Live event. Thank you everybody for showing. I mean, this is like, in a million years, I couldn't have guessed that this many people would show up for this. So what's up, Vitaly?
Well, if I can share while you're looking for the next question, Adam,
Yeah.
I think every business ends up living in an echo chamber, right? So what I found the most gratifying about, say, writing on LinkedIn is you get so much of feedback and so much of intel back on the business from working in public or, from the comments of your posts. And something I have been doing it only a few months. I've seen Adam do this very well for over a year, but this is something all of you can consider exploring.
I mentioned it earlier when I started the call because I attributed this event to this conversation with Andy and Chris Walker that I had. And I think it's a really good place to wrap it up. Like, in addition to being a marketing channel, the feedback loop coming up. And by the way, I want to say this also. The reason it is working so well for us is because I'm basically paying more attention to this than anything else I'm doing right now. And I've kind of committed to like going all in on it. And B, I am my ICP and my ICP lives on LinkedIn. So if you don't have that second part going, like if you're selling to hospitals or like elementary schools or something, then going all in like I've gone in on LinkedIn, it's not going to generate business for you. There's other reasons to have a LinkedIn presence. And, the short story is we all have to recruit people. Everyone is going to check you out who wants to come work for you. If there's an easy way for them to just get your thoughts, figure out what you're all about, what your company is all about, how you think about certain things, like LinkedIn is an incredible way to do that. It will facilitate recruiting for you. And like, how do you get started? Like, I advocate getting a ghostwriter in the very beginning because they know it's like, going to a gym and getting a trainer, right? Like, if you have no idea how to work out at all, a trainer is going to help you a lot in the very beginning. There are things that you do on LinkedIn to make posts work well that a ghostwriter will know that may not be immediately intuitive. But yeah, with a ghostwriter, you can achieve that other stuff. If you're in this magical position to where your target audience actually lives on LinkedIn, they're super active, this feedback loop from working in public, I love this book called 4 Steps to the Epiphany. I think it's the best book about starting startups or whatever. The basic premise is software is so hard to build. The instinct is to build it. And then when it gets done, go sell it. 4 Steps to the Epiphany argues that at the same time you're actually building the tech, you need to be finding the actual buyers in parallel of the tech that you're building. And if it gets to a certain point and people aren't willing to buy what your hypothesis is that they'll buy, you got to start over at the beginning. This LinkedIn exercise that Santosh and I did since the fall was like the greatest 4 Steps to the Epiphany customer discovery effort that's ever been. I mean, I talked to hundreds of people. You talked to hundreds of people. This mechanism allowed us to discover so much. We tried a pricing model. It totally flopped. LinkedIn basically told us what to do to fix it. And now we're like in the process of fixing it. It's just an amazing vehicle if you happen to be in this position where you're selling to B2B people. So I think, that's the hour. It's done.
If you want to get higher response rates, you got to get in the inbox first. Guess what? I always tell people this. If my abuelita, messages me or emails me, I'm going to open that email. I don't give a shit what the subject line is, right? Most people that you talk to about cold email today will say cold email sucks. It doesn't work. And I go, really? The subject line is the most important part of the email? No, it's not. It's actually getting the email in the inbox. The second most important part of the email